Oh, okay.
Okay, great. Okay, we are going live. Awesome. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for coming out tonight to the virtual opening for the. Okay, great. Okay. Whoa. We are going live. Awesome. Well, there's a little bit of echo there. Okay, now we're back. Thank you for coming to the opening of Open Book Art Collective's exhibition at the Silk Purse Art Center titled For the Time Being. We have some pretty amazing artists with us tonight who are ready to talk about their art and talk with you about their art. So before we get started, I will be your host. My name is Stephen Snyder. I am the Gallery and Communications Coordinator for the West Vancouver Community Arts Council, and we run the Silk Purse Art Center where this fantastic exhibition is, where you can see some of it behind me. And as we move on throughout the evening, I think it's really important that we just say how grateful the Arts Council is to be here on these lands, also known as West Vancouver, that are the traditional unceded territories of the Squamish Nation, the Musqueam Nation, and the Tsleil-Waututh Nation. And we are incredibly grateful for the evening. There's a chat, and you are all welcome to type in comments and questions for our fantastic artists, and we'll get to those near the end of the night. And yeah, so anything you want to say it in there. It'll be fantastic. I'm sure everyone will have a great time answering all your questions. And now, let's get into it. Let's talk a little bit about the Open Book Art Collective, this group of artists presenting this fantastic exhibition to one of the members, Cara Bain, to tell us a little bit more about the collective.
Hi, everybody. So we are the Open Book Art Collective, although we often call ourselves OBAC for short. And we seek to create a dialogue between art and literature in our group. And so we have been inspired to gather ourselves around stories and other people around stories. And we're interested in excavating narratives through visual language. So we all use different mediums such as painting, encaustic, drawing, sculpture, and textiles, amongst others. And our artists are brought together by a passion for literature, sharing ideas, making art constructive criticism, and a desire to build community. So we were founded in 2013. Kat was our founding member. She came up with the idea and she brought us all together around this idea of spurring each other on in our creative practices. And we were all inspired by books and really interested in how books and visual art could create a dialogue together. So for our process, we choose a book together, kind of vote on it, and agree on it, and then we read it on our own and then meet together to discuss the themes from as many angles as possible. And then we spend some time on our own developing those themes into pieces through our own practice and creative process, which are very different person to person. And then our goal is that at the end of all that, we put exhibitions together so that our viewers are coming to the exhibitions and viewing the book through as many lenses as possible, sort of like a prism, to show the same work but through many different angles. And each of our artists brings a really different voice to the team, which is great. So our hope is that even visitors who haven't read the book or don't know anything about it can engage with the show, because we hope they can see our themes through our work. And that's about it.
Muted. Thank you for that, Cara. That was a great overview of what you do. It's a fantastic idea, wonderful concept. I've never really heard of anything like this before. So now let's meet the rest of our fantastic artists. So they're all going to tell you a little bit about themselves. Let's start with Andrea Armstrong.
Hi, I'm Andrea. I work as a visual artist. My background is in graphic design, and I still continue to do graphic design work. I illustrate, I do a little bit of animation, and I paint. I do a lot of portraiture. And then, yeah, any opportunity I have to create work for shows with OBAC and other outlets, I'm eager to do so. So I do a variety of things. My favorite is to paint with oils. And so this show has given me the opportunity to do that. And my work tends to be quite figurative, like character-based. So you'll often find images of people, often of myself in my work. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Excellent. Thank you, Andrea. That was wonderful. Next up would be, we'll throw it back to Cara.
Hi again, everybody. I'm Cara, and like Andrea, I predominantly work in oils as well. And I also have a big focus on the human form in my work, as well as a big focus on landscapes, mostly around BC as well. But in my figurative work, I often am incorporating metals, like metal leaf or actual metal, and specifically copper. I love, I'm a little bit obsessed with copper over the last few years, and I'll talk a bit more about that a little bit later on. And I'm also an art instructor, so I teach kids and teens and adults to love art as much as I do, I hope.
Great. Well, thanks, Cara, for that. And next up is another talented artist, Katrina Grabner. Tell us a bit about yourself.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Thanks for having us today. My profession is that I'm an art therapist and a trauma counselor. And as a visual artist, I primarily do installation work and also work with encaustics. And so that's a mix of wax and tree resin coming together. I do a lot of experimenting in my work, so trying new things, working with fabric, using natural found materials. And in this show, I stretched myself and began experimenting with video and poetry together.
Excellent. Great. Thank you, Katrina. And then again, another talented artist. Let's introduce everyone to Jenny Hawkinson.
Hi there. Okay, I'll talk about my practice first. I am a multimedia artist, so I really like working with textiles, but I'm also into small sculpture and all sorts of different things. My art is very concept-based, and so if I don't know how to do something, but it works best with a concept, then I'll try to learn how to do that to make the work. And in my non-studio-based practice, I'm a street outreach worker in the downtown east side, and I have also in the past year accidentally become a mural artist. So that's me.
That's kind of how art works, is you accidentally become something a lot of the time. And our next fantastic artist is Jennifer Sarkar.
Hello, I hope you can't see me, but I hope you can all hear me. And there has been a little bit of technical problem, but a little bit of background. I was born in Bangladesh, but I moved here when I was 16 years old. My visual background is in visual arts and fine arts, and then I transferred it to graphic design. Professionally, currently, I'm an elementary teacher right now, but however, I still love to draw and paint. Very similar to Kat, I love to explore. So this was the first time I actually worked with texture and flower with my painting. Just capturing basic, normal, regular day through my drawing and painting, just keep exploring. I think that's what I love. So I don't have a specific medium that I'm completely focused on, but mostly just looking and learning and doing. That's it.
Great, that's awesome. Thank you, Jennifer. And now on to the next artist up. It's a fantastic artist named Mahla Shapiro Finkelman. Mahla, introduce yourself to everyone.
Thank you so much. I was born in the UK and I grew up in Toronto. And from as early as I can remember, all I wanted was more and more colors. And in university at Emily Carr, I studied a lot of color theory and really took to Joseph Alder's work and all of his exploration. And my work really ranges from printmaking to painting to textiles to photography. It's really color that I'm after, and I will explore any medium, this show exploring resin for the first time, to capture and convey the messages that I seek to portray. Thanks for coming.
Excellent, awesome, thank you, Mahla. We're nearing the end, folks. We've got another fantastic artist to introduce you to, Kristin Voth Davies.
Hi everyone, I'm Kristen. So I grew up in Abbotsford, near to Vancouver, and currently live in Vancouver. I am a visual artist and I most enjoy drawing and painting. Typically, I really enjoy doing acrylic paintings, focusing on themes of nostalgia and memory and family. And since becoming a mother in 2020, my work is kind of merging more into drawing and working with watercolors, things that I can pick up when I only have 30 minutes to do some work. Outside of my art practice, I work with children and teach art. Nice to meet you, thank you.
Excellent, thank you. And our final artist to introduce you all to tonight is Yiya Yin. Please let us know a bit more about you.
Hi, everyone. I'm so thankful to be part of this collective, and thank you, Steve. My Chinese name is Yiya, and I was born in a small county called Lintong, China, in central China, and it's where the terracotta warriors were first discovered. I have family both in central China and in Beijing, northern China, and I'm very influenced and rooted in my cultural heritage as well. I'm very thankful to have journeyed with my parents as immigrants in Canada since the age of 7.5. Having lived in Halifax, Nova Scotia, to Ottawa, and then to Vancouver, I've really been thankful to also discover so many different mediums that now I practice as a multimedia artist, ranging from painting to illustration. And I graduated from Emily Carr in design, so I've spent time supporting social enterprises and corporate organizations in branding and art direction. I also love exploring storytelling for children and doing puppetry, as well as enjoy some songwriting. And for me, art is really a sacred act that I believe God, the creator, has just given me the ability, the gift of using various vocabularies in color and shape and form in different mediums and materials to express and to liberate my spirit. And hopefully in the witnessing of the act of this mystery that comes out, which turns out to be some form of art or some form of expression, that I first encounter and have a conversation, hopefully that is going to help me grow and to restore my humanity, but then also to then share it with family, with friends, with the public, is another amazing kind of ripple effect to see the power and the potency of how art can stimulate and regenerate aspects of deep truth that of the human condition, and also just to explore questions we as humans continue to have. So thank you so much.
Thank you, that was wonderful. Thank you, everyone, for those introductions. That's fantastic. There is one more artist who isn't here tonight, but their work is in the exhibition, so you can come on and see it. Her name is Bree Mcdaniel. Really cool stuff. Speaking of the exhibition, as I said earlier, it's on at the Silk Purse Arts Center here in West Vancouver, next to John Lawson Park, and it will be here until August the 29th. And right now, we're going to take you through a quick little tour of the exhibit, a little, you can see a little bit of what it's like. And then hopefully that will entreat you to come on down in person to have a look at it. Just gotta pull it up because everything disappeared on me. All right. Awesome. So this is kind of what it looks like as you come in off our waterfront entrance, kind of get a scope of the whole thing. It's pretty amazing to see it all together. There's a lot of artwork to take in. Like as Katrina mentioned, she just moved into video, so that was her video. And there's a copy of the book that all this fantastic artwork is based upon. And beside each artist's work, they have a fantastic statement that gives you a little bit more in depth about their piece and its inspiration, its process, and how it all ties into the book for the time being. As you can see, there's a lot of varied art forms happening in here. You know, painting, illustration, photography, the resin sculpting and casting. As everyone has said in their intros, there's textiles, there's found objects. It's a pretty stunning collection of pieces. And we'll be getting a little further into some of these pieces by these artists in just a few minutes. We're going to do some deep dives into their specific pieces. So that'll be very interesting to hear. And there's also merch. So you can come by the gallery and pick up some calendars and postcards and prints by these talented artists as well. And there were so many great pieces, we couldn't fit it all into the gallery proper. So we've got some more just around the corner. And behind our other reception desk, there's Bree Mcdaniel's pieces. Awesome. Great. Cool. That was lovely. So it was a little quick. Definitely come on down and spend some greater time with these pieces and really get immersed with it. Now to tell us a little bit more about sort of the theme of the intro of the exhibition, one of our amazing artists here is going to tell you a little bit about the process and the book that inspired this exhibition.
How can an individual count? Do individuals count only to us, other suckers, who love and grieve like elephants, bless their hearts? Annie Dillard in For the Time Being. This exhibition features an honest and probing collection of artwork that draws inspiration from and dialogues with American writer Annie Dillard's For the Time Being. Dillard's work invites the reader to an intricate narrative in which seemingly random threads of thought are masterfully woven together. Each chapter is broken into 10 categories: birth, sand, China, clouds, numbers, Israel, encounters, thinker, evil, and now. Within these categories, Dillard builds a grid-like structure of short narratives, research, and theological explorations that take reader from historical and religious sites in Israel to the deserts of China, from a North American obstetrical ward to the devastation of the 1991 floods in Bangladesh. Her influences are also wide-ranging. She draws from Jewish Hasidic thought, the writers of paleontologist Teilhard de Chardin, personal travel stories, and a medical guide to human birth defects. These threads, in For the Time Being, are tied together by an existential question: how can an individual count? The artists of the Open Back Art Collective each address unique threads of inquiry in the book. Given the turmoil of the past year and a half, sorry, just one second. Given the turmoil of the past year and a half,
Ravi's crying.
I'm so sorry. Everyone's working from home and it is turmoil for all of us. Given the turmoil from the past year and a half, the artists draw a personal connection between Dillard's writing and their experiences. Cara Bain's paintings explore moths and rust as a metaphor for the ephemerality of life. Jenny Hawkinson's Pinhole Photography addresses her journey through grief. Andrea Armstrong's paintings appeal to the impermanence of the body and explore what Dillard describes as the spark of the divine within the individual. Drawing from Dillard's explorations of sand and remembering of cultures buried within the earth, Jen Sarkar and Katrina Grabner reference layers of narrative, history, and culture in their mixed media pieces. Yiya unearths her heritage and sense of self in her paintings, reflecting on the terracotta warriors discovered in Lintong, China. My work in resin refers to Jewish thought by exploring the ways in which life's meaning can be found in tikkun, the idea that we are here to rebuild, to fix, to impact each other. Kristin Voth Davies' watercolor paintings consider Dillard's descriptions of the mystery of newborns alongside her daughter's growth and development. And finally, Bree Mcdaniel's work finds connection between layers of language, spirituality, and the land. Open Book Art Collective seeks to create a visual, literary dialogue that is inspired by story. With mediums such as painting, encaustic, drawing, installation, sculpture, and textile, the artists of OBAC are brought together by their passion for literature, sharing ideas, making art, constructive criticism, and a desire to build a creative community.
That was wonderful. Thank you so much, Mahla, for doing that. That was wonderful. What a great thesis. What a great statement. And now, let's get into a little bit more meat about some of the stuff that was mentioned in that wonderful statement. So each of our artists is going to talk a little bit about some of the work they have on display and tell you a bit more about everything that went into creating it. So first up, we've got Andrea.
So these are my pieces. And I'm interested in the question, within the vastness of human history and population, how can an individual matter? The holiness of the present moment and its insignificance within geological time. This paradox overwhelms me. I'm interested in the significance and the insignificance of our existence. It's limited and it's precious, and it's also not that special. My first piece, limited edition on the top left, speaks to the preciousness of this one life. this one body, being and soul that each person embodies. My second one, subject matter, is a play on words. That death is so often the topic of art. It is the subject matter. It references the inevitable return of the human body to the earth. We are subjects in our stories, and we come from and we will return to matter. We are finite creatures existing within infinity and carrying infinity within us. My piece Infinite speaks to this folding. Annie Dillard wrote that the divine essence withdrew into itself to make room for a finite world. And finally, You Are Here is about the place we each locate ourselves every day. Our participation in this limited living time is experienced in our bodies, where we find ourselves. The sanctity of this moment can only be experienced here and now, as we inhabit our not so special, yet sacred bodies. Thanks.
Excellent. Thank you, Andrea. I kind of probably threw the group for a little bit of a loop there. We were going to start with a different one, but I messed up. Sorry about that. So our next artist will go through again, Cara Bain. Please tell us about the piece that we're going to see in a minute.
Yeah, so my themes intersect with Andrea's quite a bit. When I read the book, I was really struck with the idea of our defiant aliveness in the face of our fragility as humans and our short lives in the context of the vastness of time in general. And I had an experience last September where I went for a hike at Lynn Valley Headwaters. And as I was pulling into the parking lot, I thought it was snowing because there was these white glints in the air and a layer of white on the ground. And I was like, oh, that's so weird. It's September, it's warm, that can't be. So I got out of the car and started walking, and I realized it was a bloom of moss that apparently happens once every 2 decades or so. And it's a natural phenomenon of these moths called Western Hemlock leapers. And they were all fluttering above this rushing river. And then there was just hundreds or thousands probably just in the water who had deceased, and they were all spinning around in these whirlpools at the edge of the stream and then getting sucked under the water into the white rapids. And it just seemed like such a poignant image of Annie Dillard's book and these ideas of these moths that have such short lives, and you don't really differentiate one moth from the other, and yet they're so beautiful and I'm sure so individual if you got to know the moth. But anyways, I was really inspired by that image. So I got my good friend Kat, who's in our group, to pose for me because she seemed so alive and lives life just so much. And I painted her just surrounded by these moths in this kind of traditional death pose, but I just wanted her face to look so alive and present and defiant of death and mortality. And yeah, and so the other thing I'm really interested in lately is the idea of metal, and in particular copper. And when it comes to this book, it related really well because I see metal as this very defiant substrate, this very hard material. You think of it as lasting forever. And yet in both of my pieces here, you can see the what metal turns into when it goes under extreme pressure of different kinds, either time or in the piece on the left, I heated it with a torch, and the green and blue patina of the copper is where it has eroded from acid. So those are 2 types of copper patinas you can achieve, and they produce many colors. So yeah, all of these ideas kind of feed together into this idea of what our place is, this fragile place we hold in the world, and yet how we cling to it and are stubborn about our aliveness. That's all.
Excellent. Thank you for the insights into your work, Cara. Next up is Katrina, and it's not quite a static image. We've got a little bit of a video. I would love to be down in the gallery live to film this, but our internet connection down there is pretty rough. So we've got a little video of this upcoming piece.
I can start sharing a little bit about the piece if that works.
That would be great.
So the piece was inspired by the layers in the soil and how when we begin to dig down, there's such a richness that we discover about the planet that we're on. And so it's, part of it is called Where Are We Going? We move between two darknesses. And so this is a multimedia piece, and I used all of my ideas to create it. At the top and the bottom, there's encaustic happening. So I use silk dyed or ice dyed silk that I infuse between layers of wax and resin with my torch. And then at the beach just by the gallery, actually, I gathered sand, I gathered garbage and plastic, I gathered little bits and baubles that I found there. And really what I'm, was contemplating is where we are right now, similar to what Andrea was sharing. We inhabit this one moment in time as humans, and also there's a story that we're leaving behind in the layers of the earth. And what is this story that we're telling? You can see that person working really hard there and looking out, and the ways that we as humans, really kind of, it reminded me of the story of the Tower of Babel in some ways, the ways how we're reaching, climbing, working so hard, and the impacts that can have on the planet. And yet, there's these red strings in all of my work throughout the gallery, really symbolizing to me maybe as something a bit beyond ourselves, maybe a heartbeat or a sacredness woven throughout time that we try to grasp or try to climb, try to understand. And so I'm just going to read something from Annie Dillard. She wrote, "Since sand and dirt pile up on everything, why does it look fresh for each new crowd as natural and human debris raises the continents, vegetation grows on the piles? It is all a stage set. We know this, a temporary stage on top of many layers of stages. But every year, fungus, bacteria, and termites carry off the old layer. And every year, a new crop of sand, grass, and tree leaves freshens the set and perfects the illusion that ours is the new and urgent world now. How can we doubt our own time, in which each bright instant probes the future? We live and move by splitting the light of the present as a canoe's bow parts water. And so really all of my pieces are an exploration of time and perhaps time travel. Thank you.
Excellent, fantastic. Thank you so much, Katrina. That was lovely, and thanks for reading another quote from the book. Next up, Jenny Hawkinson.
So I had two different pieces. I had a collection of pinhole photography, which as a collection is labeled, How Can an Individual Count? And we've heard that line a couple times already because that's a pretty strong theme throughout the book. And then the second piece is an embroidery of a heart and lungs, and that piece is called Their Hearts Seize. I am going to read my artist statement because I think you'll get more from that. One death is a tragedy. 1,000,000 deaths are a statistic. Joseph Stalin, the gormandizer, gave words to this disquieting and possibly universal sentiment. How can an individual count? Do individuals count only to us other suckers who love and grieve like elephants? Bless their hearts. Annie Dillard, and for the time being. Last spring, I embroidered a heart and lungs on an antique linen in an attempt to manage my rising anxiety around the pandemic. The fragility of the linen spoke to me of human frailty. Little did I know that a few months later, eerily, my father would pass away suddenly from a hidden heart condition. In the months following, I would struggle to breathe through the grief of loss and a broken heart. I still wrestle with Dillard's question, how can an individual count? The anonymous suffering and bereavement of millions worldwide came into focus with my loss. After an emergency visit to see my family down past the border, I had to come back and I was hidden in quarantine, left to sort through the layers of emotion and memory by myself. It was during this time that I learned the DIY art of pinhole photography. I had become nearsighted in my grief. Pinhole photography, with its arduous process of developing film in the darkroom and chance encounters with clear images, because I'm inexperienced, became a powerful metaphor for my and millions of others' experience. Of course, the individual counts. I used my father's plaid shirt, which you can see in this piece on the screen, and an axe and a tarp as the subjects for these photos, because those were the only things I could find in my backyard while I was in quarantine. These are things that remind me of him. Memories are like pinhole photographs. One never knows when they will surface or become clear. And to add to this, it was a really interesting process because I had never worked with this medium before. As I said before, I'm a very conceptual artist. And so if there's an idea that seems to work the best, then I'll try my hardest to do it. And I found it a really frustrating process. But when there was something that finally appeared, it just felt that much more precious and special. And so some of the other photographs, if you go to the gallery, they came out a lot clearer, but for some reason, this piece feels the most sacred to me. And Annie Dillard writes a lot about absence and presence as well, and that strange paradox, and how sometimes a person's absence feels much stronger than their presence. Thanks for listening.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that, Jenny. And some amazing insights that you are all giving tonight into your work. It's lovely to hear. And next, we have another talented artist, Jennifer Sarkar.
Hello. Can you hear me properly?
Yes.
Great. So with Annie Dillard book, I I was telling Kat and rest of the group when I first started reading the book that I'm very used to with linear story process, and I was having very difficult time connecting with the book. But I did connect with the very specific part where it was mentioning about Bangladesh, because I'm from there and you can't help it. You naturally bond with that piece. And it talked about how during the typhoon, there's millions of lives lost. But it comes back to me, for me, the story of how, what Kat was mentioning, the layers upon layers. So my work began with very unpredictable way of aerial view of a flood scene, and I never used the medium flour before, just bleach flour from my kitchen, and it kind of it cracked very unpredictably, and those representing the layers that is cracked, the layers that is unknown and unpredictable, and that's the unknown of the future as well, because when the flood happens, I remember in my artist statement, a year before we moved to Canada, there was the 2005 Sri Lanka, the tsunami happened. Now, Bangladesh and Sri Lanka is on the southeast side. We didn't get to see the tsunami. However, my dad woke us up that morning. We were in our grandfather's house. There's a pond right behind, and the water was kind of going in a circle. And we learned that there was a tsunami happening during the same time. Fortunately, Bangladesh that year wasn't hit, but thousands of people passed away because of that. And that kind of reminded me of the story and the event that I experienced, but also when every year and big catastrophe that happens, the layers get hidden and new things come up. And we forget those layers and forget those events. And my piece kind of represent those pieces of puzzle pieces sometimes we need to put together to see the full story. And those cracks representing the layers that you kind of have to, it's unpredictable, but you have to kind of wait to see where it goes. And that's the part that I strongly connected with the books. And I found my own story within it. So, and that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you so much for sharing that. Next up, Mahla has a very colorful work of art that she's going to tell us a bit more about.
Thank you so much, Stephen. I think it best if I read my artist statement to convey my ideas and inspirations for the work. In the beginning, according to Rabbi Isaac Luria, God contracted himself, Zimzum. The divine essence withdrew into itself to make room for a finite world. The holy light burst into vessels. The vessels splintered and scattered. Sparks of holiness fell to the depths, and the opaque shards of the broken vessels, the klipot, imprisoned them. This is our bleak world. We see only the demonic shells of things. Only redemption, restoration, tikkun, can return the sparks of light to their source in the primeval soul. Only redemption can restore God's exiled presence to his being in eternity. Pages 50 to 52 in Annie Dillard's For the Time Being. Born and raised Jewish into a lineage of migration, to me, Israel has always felt like the one constant place I can call home. My parents are South African. I was born in Scotland, raised in Toronto, and have lived in communities in New York, Ireland, and Jerusalem for the better part of the last 12 years. My geographical home has been here on the West Coast in Vancouver. Twice in my life, for a year each, I have returned to the cobblestone streets of my ancient homeland. First, after high school, and then again last year with my husband and 3 kids under the age of 4. The smells, the tastes, the ancient sites, the living history, the people, the food, the diversity of culture was something that was palpable and unique only to Jerusalem. Dillard, time and again throughout her novel, insists through different religious, scientific, and other quotes that this world has a heavenly force, and we are, quote, earth's organs and limbs. We are syllables God utters from his mouth. Page 133. She questions where sand comes from and why it is in the desert, 66. and ultimately comes to the conclusion that we are here for the sake of tikkun, to rebuild, to fix, to impact each other. Quote, sometimes we touch strangers, sometimes no one speaks. Like clouds, we travelers meet and part with members of our cohort, our fellows in the parting caravans of those who are alive while we are. How many strangers have we occasion to hold in our arms? 135. When walking into a landscape of her book, I felt the earthy red tones of the sand, the sky blues, the ocean foaming up at the shoreline, deep browns of the mud, tans of the ancient stone, army greens, and pine needles. For me, the repetition of the Khamsa symbol, the hand, purposefully combines different elements that comprise the social, religious, and physical landscape of Israel. Through this process of creating objects that come together to create a larger tapestry, I feel a personal tikkun. I see these khamsot, these hands, as a physical expression of the light of the vessels that splintered and scattered. The sparks of holiness and the opaque shards are realized through the translucent quality within the resin. Resin, as I mentioned earlier, is not a medium I've ever worked in before, but it offers, as you can see, a diversification of totally transparent, translucent, and opaque. And working with thread and poppy seeds and different mediums within really offered me the opportunity to explore and deepen my interest in color and really relate to the book in a way that was meaningful to myself. Thanks so much.
That was, again, fantastic. Thank you so much, Mahla. It's wonderful to hear all of the exploring and experimenting that you're all doing with this exhibition, with this artwork inspired by this book. It's just wonderful to hear. Next, Kristen, you have some work from Kristen to look at and hear about.
Hi. So I'm just going to start by reading a quote from the book. So Annie Dillard writes, "There might well be a rough angel guarding this ward, or a dragon, or an upswelling current that dashes boats on rocks. There might well be an old stone cairn in the hall by the elevators, or a well, or a ruined shrine wall where people still hear bells. Should we not remove our shoes, drink potions, take baths? For this is surely the wildest deep-sea vent on earth. This is where the people come out. Here on the obstetrical ward is a double sink in a little room, a chrome faucet, 2 basins and drains, just like any kitchen sink. There at a counter on the left, there's a counter on the right. Overhead, a long heat lamp lights and warms the 2 counters in the sink. This is where they wash the newborns like dishes." So I never intended to paint babies for this exhibition. I had a very different project in mind. But after my daughter was born in November of 2020, I found myself drawn to these themes in the book in spite of myself. Her hospital birthplace felt like the sacred space that Annie Dillard described. And yet it was also mundane, with its beeping machines, bland meals, and the achingly ordinary pains of birth and postpartum. These works feature my daughter's movements and gestures awakening to the world in the first months of her life. I began drawing from video of footage of her wake-up stretches and slow discovery of her hands, her wrigglings and squirmings. During the blur of postpartum, my daughter's movements have been a readily accessible subject matter. My days have been absorbed with her, and it was a natural fit to funnel this absorption into my creative process. I developed a drawing practice during my occasional hours to myself, drawing sessions that were punctuated with cries and sandwiched between breastfeeding sessions. Because of this, I see these pieces as speaking to the immediacy of early parenthood. These pieces are part of a group that I have titled Wash Like Dishes, thinking of this section that I read from Annie Dillard. I had in mind the image of a nurse washing baby after baby in a hospital. My daughter, sturdier than any porcelain plate, but far more precious, her skull so soft, her cries so fierce. The comparison between babies and plates caught my imagination as it captures the simultaneous robustness and fragility of infancy. There's a circular quality to infancy, each child striving and reaching for each milestone that billions have reached before. Although there's nothing new about being born, it is at the same time everything new and extraordinary. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much, Kristen. And next up, Yiya, if you would please tell us about these fantastic works of art we're going to see.
Thank you so much. I think these are two separate paintings, but I've just put them side by side just as a moment to juxtapose two very different experiences. I'll start with the first painting on the left. It's a painting that really, for me, explores what it means to be in flux within my own heritage, my identity, and my roots, my history. The portrait itself is based around a photograph, archival photograph taken of an actual terracotta warrior found in the pits on site in Lingtong, China. And so the terracotta warriors is one of the ancient wonders of the world. During the reign of the first emperor of China, Qin Shi Huang, in the 3rd century BC, he commissioned artisans from all around China. Well, they didn't really have a choice to then create and produce thousands upon thousands of life-size clay soldiers that will help create this afterlife kingdom for the emperor. And so alongside these replicates of the clay warriors were also clay servants, horses, objects of beauty, luxuries, and also functional weaponry, tools, and technology. And this is all conjured up from one man's desire to shift his belongings into preparation for his kingdom, for his afterlife. And so the terracotta warriors is part of the tomb that is constructing this microcosm of the emperor's like imperial palace while he was alive and what he hopes for in his afterlife. And for me, being born right next to this wonder of the ancient wonder of the world, I really was always connected to the epic history of the first emperor of China, and yet feeling quite incredibly small just as just an ordinary person. In the book, Annie Dillard mentioned that there's, at the time, basically 1.2 billion people alive now in China. Currently, it's about 1.4. And she writes, to get a feel for what this means, simply take yourself in all your singularity, importance, complexity, and love, and multiply that by 1.2 billion. And so she goes, see, nothing to it. As Ted Bundy points out, there's so many people. What can a single life matter? Why should you care? And so from that moment of reading this, I felt the need to kind of go back to my roots and create a piece that evokes the sensation of waking from this slumber. And so the character, this terracotta face, is kind of in between, shifting between its clay state and the human flesh. So psychologically, I kind of journey through this painting as a way of like resurrecting my Chinese cultural value system, remembering a lot of memories of growing up, remembering also the inheritance of transgenerational values from my parents, my grandparents, and the stories of my ancestry. And what does it mean to really see myself as an artist, as a time capsule, as one that protects the wisdom of family traditions, of family stories, of also family myths. And with that, as we share the stories of our families comes also the reality of trauma and tragedy. And so in the face of this terracotta warrior, as I was painting it, what was emerging was also the suffering of the stories that I know of my grandparents and of my parents and of the tragedies that happened throughout history in China. And the other piece that I then navigated towards in thinking about entering into suffering and also creating from a place of redemptive hope. The candles really for me was a response when I was recovering from COVID in a 21-day quarantine. And I really, resonate with Mahla's sharing in the sense that she was very drawn to trying to create sparks of holiness. And for me, this piece is really a type of icon work where the candlelight represents the abidance that I felt of God's holy presence and care in my time alone, in my time in quarantine, but also it helped me empathize deeply with global experiences of suffering in which we're all have suffered in one form or another through the pandemic. And so it is a piece that I hope when people see it in person, that it creates a moment of mindfulness, of both appreciating for the time being the idea of like staying in the present moment, being aware of your body, taking the time to acknowledge any difficult or even hopeful sensations that's flowing through. And then also, coming into a time of remembrance, like what Jenny Hawkinson said in her sharing, that sometimes we can feel someone's absence far stronger than when perhaps we, took them for granted when they were, present, or we thought it was, always going to be. So this piece also is a moment in which I hope people can situate themselves in a remembrance of either people that you want to send intentions of love and care to, or people that have passed away recently due to the pandemic or due to other factors. So thank you so much for listening in on my creative process.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, it's amazing to hear all of your personal relationships with the artwork and creating it, and how that ties back into the novel, and how it really ties back into a lot of the things that you're all kind of saying, all these very universal themes and experiences that people are having. It's pretty wonderful. And speaking of working together and thinking along the same path, we have one last work of art to look at, and that is a really interesting group project. And I believe, Katrina, you were going to talk a little bit about this piece.
Yeah, so we did a group piece for this show called Moving and Still, and it's always fun when we get to work on something together. And so for this piece, I think it's fitting that we're ending with this. Actually, I think it makes way more sense. We each contributed some items from our process, so you can see remnants of Jenny's pinhole camera, a really important piece. I've got some encaustic brushes that I can no longer use, parts of some experiments that didn't work out. Mahla's got in there. There's copper. There's bits and bobbles of everything, because you see a small bit of our work, maybe just the tip of an iceberg, but there's many experiments, there's many other items that have been a part of that process. And yet we also know that we're in this process of time. And one day, all of the art that you have seen, although it is it's precious and meaningful to us, it will also one day find itself buried below the surface of the earth in the sand. And so reflecting on that process of being alive and being on the earth, it's also, we're a part of time and it's inescapable. And Annie Dillard writes, the earth sifts over things. If you stay still, earth buries you, ready or not. The debris on the tops of your feet or shoes thickens. Wind-blown dirt piles around it, and pretty soon your feet are underground. And so when I see this piece, I don't feel, you could feel sad about it, but it's not a sad thing. And I think this show and reading the book, it's not, you know, reflecting on this experience of being human and being a part of time and being a part of particles in motion that come together and come apart and become a part of new things, this recycling that happens. And so this piece is a reflection on our part of all that process as artists. And we can even think about our ideas in that way, you know, where we were taking ideas also from Annie and other artists, and we weave them together in this moment, and then maybe someone sees our work and it gets put into new pieces and we let it go. And when we look at art, from the beginning of time, humans have been creating in some form. It is a flowing process of coming together, letting go, coming together. And so, yeah, on that note, I think there's a letting go. There's a letting go in the life of art making.
Wow. Yeah. Thank you. Thank all of you. That was, I don't know what else to say. You all said so many amazing, inspiring things and fantastic insight into your artwork. And just a reminder to everyone watching, if you have any questions or comments, please write them in the chat. Actually, someone, we've got Vaughn R has said very simulating. I think maybe they meant to say stimulating. These are works of substance with an exclamation mark. So they really, totally true. They're very substantial pieces. Does anyone have anything else they want to add, to jump onto something someone else has said? Anything else to add about the experience of creating this exhibition, creating these pieces?
Yeah, I'd like to say something. I think, well, I should only speak for myself. When we read the book last year, so the show was originally planned for last August, I remember feeling really excited for the book, but then not being able to connect with it personally. Like having a really hard time figuring out how I was going to make this work authentic for myself and authentic for anyone else that might come across it. And then I think we started reading it like a couple months before last March, right? March 2020. And then everything happened and the show got canceled. And the more I read the book, the more things started to feel that much more alive and that much more relevant. And the themes that Annie Dillard was writing, she even writes about like every generation has its, or every decade has its crazy things that happen, and we all feel like this is the end of the world, like our decade is the end, and then something happens in the next decade. So I just found it really interesting, the timing in the book and our group conversations.
Wonderful. Awesome. Thanks for that, Jenny. Have the rest of you, have you read anything else by this author?
Yeah, some artists here are big Annie Dillard fans. I know that. I'm looking at them right now. And some of us, this was an introduction to Dillard's work. And so, yeah, that's often, sorry, that's often how our books work. One of us has read an author or is excited about it and introduces it. And then we begin to explore together.
I'll say I'm pretty obsessed with Annie Dillard. I especially recommend Holy the Firm and The May Trees and Pilgrim at Tinker Creek. So yeah, but she's wonderful.
Great. Oh, that's wonderful. So as kind of you guys talked about this a little bit in your sort of the statement from the collective and oh, sorry, didn't mean to talk over someone. Oh, sorry, my screen is freezing, everyone. Sorry about that. Yeah, so you talked a bit in some of your statements and in the group statement about about how you collaborate and talk about the work. Is there anything else you want to say about that, about what it's like coming together with these other artists to discuss these themes and figure out where you're going to go with your artwork?
Share a little bit. Oh, and then Mahla can go. But I think, yeah, I've been with the group from the beginning, and I think what this group provided for me was community and how much making can happen on our own, but it can also happen together, and it's so rich when it can happen together. And I know that there's ideas and roads of material exploration that I've gone down that I don't think I would have gone down on my own. And then, you know, it can be really lonely, I think, sometimes, the making experience. And so even just to have other artists to apply for shows with, to ask for feedback on statements, to just collaborate around what it is that we are, what it is that we're doing, you know, this communication that art making is with culture. It can be confusing to find one's place within that. And so for me, when I look back at the past 8 years, I was making a calendar for the show of our past 8 years together, and it was really moving for me. And I was reflecting on just my own journey, and I'm like, whoa, I do not think I would have grown in the same way at all as an artist. It really is beautiful to see the power of community in shaping that journey.
And for my 3 young kids, having this art community has really pushed myself to read books that I wouldn't have time to read, to create artwork inspired from a particular source that is outside of myself that I wouldn't have otherwise made. And I'm so grateful to be part of this collaboration. When I move to Toronto, I hope that we'll have shows both here and there in a real way. And I think that the fact that we all work in such different mediums that overlap and complement each other really helps us give feedback to each other in a way that can't be done in a studio on your own. And so I'm very grateful that we're all together.
I have one more thing to add. Just in what a richness it brings to the experience of the books that we read. Because sometimes when I'm reading some of the books that we've done in the past, I don't necessarily connect to them right away or as much as other people in the group. But then when you start talking about the themes together, people just come with these really amazing ideas that open up doors to whole new worlds of thought for the literature. And especially when it comes to our opening receptions, when we hear everybody's artist talks, it just gives us really amazing view of the book that we've read that I never would have gotten just reading the book on my own. So that has also been given me like an extra dynamic experience of the literature.
Yeah, I fully agree with Cara, and I just also want to add, like, I think one of the most enriching aspect of working in a collective, growing the momentum is seeing the show, all the puzzle pieces kind of put together, where we're all in our own little cocoons during COVID, and then when we can have this level of like deep diving into our creative process, like right now I'm like so inspired and feeling a sensation of like serendipity, where um, like I'm now seeing like the impact that I was trying to have with my painting, of trying to compress time with in the portraiture, is done uniquely in Andrea's piece, where in one of her pieces she was juxtaposing the Da Vinci's Geometry of Man illustration with like a Google map iconic pinpoint. This idea in which Katrina also mentioned about, like, in our artwork we're time traveling. In her literature, Annie Dillard's work, she's kind of this archaeologist time traveler too. And Katrina's work was also so powerful to see these um, uh, like cells of archaeological digs of her environment, and evidence of humanity's both degradation to our ecosystem, but also evidence of what we create, what we have brought into existence on land. And I also loved Cara's work, where she was trying to create this, for me, like this impression of flesh emerging from copper, where I really kind of resonate with that, because I was trying to create and regenerate that sensation of resurrection through like clay becoming flesh. And it's only in this moment where I deep dive to listen in on the creative process, where I'm like, oh my gosh, there's so many connection points of how we uniquely interpreted like time traveling, or like our understanding and interpretation and expression of like meandering through these thoughts that Annie Dillard sparked through her novel. So really, really, like, just came into a moment right now of just feeling this beautiful gallery experience of very unique juxtapositions of like neural pathways of interpreting this novel. It's pretty amazing.
Wonderful. Those were all wonderful points, everyone. Thank you so much. I think we're about ready to wrap things up. So again, thank you everyone for watching presently, and everyone who will be watching this again in the future. And thank you to all of our amazing artists who created such fantastic work and who came out tonight to tell you a little bit more about it. And like I said, the exhibition For the Time Being by the Open Book Art Collective is on at the Silk Purse Art Center in West Vancouver until August 29th, 2021. And we're so happy that we were able to get the exhibition in, even when it wasn't last year, we were able to get it in this year. It was great. And where can anyone find out more about Open Book Art Collective, if anyone wants to give us their socials or anything like that?
Yeah, we'd love for you to follow us. We're on Instagram at Open Book Art Collective. That's where we post a lot of sneak peeks at what we're making and our new shows and books. And then our website is openbookartcollective.com. We're also on Facebook, and you can just search Open Book Art Collective there as well.
Excellent. Awesome. Thank you so much. And thank you everyone again who showed up tonight. And please come on down and check out this fantastic exhibition. It's immersive, it's inspiring, and you'll definitely walk away a little different. So take care, enjoy the rest of your evening, and stay safe and stay creative. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye, thank you.
And thank you, Stephen, for facilitating and hosting.
Yes, thank you, Stephen.
Thank you, Stephen.
Thanks. It was a choppy night, but we got through it. Awesome. Take care, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.